Noswaith dda, croeso
A
mawr.
very good evening and a warm welcome to you all to this webinar this evening, where we will be looking at the future of rural Wales, and it's a pleasure to have a panel gathered here this evening to discuss this important issue.
That require translation. If you can please look at the icon at the bottom of the screen, which is the kind of world icon, which has interpretation underneath it, and press and select English. That hopefully should give you translation for the event, which will be in both English and Welsh throughout. Felly, mae'r pandemic COVID.
The COVID pandemic and various different events this year have changed the way we live and work in rural Wales. And it's affected people from all backgrounds, of course, but it also has had a different impact on us living in rural Wales as opposed to other areas. And this is the first in a series of events held throughout November, where we will be discussing Wales's future as part of the GWLAD programme. And 2020 has been a very turbulent year. If you look back to the beginning of the year, we had the flooding events. We were then hit by the pandemic, and then we have seen the impact that that has had on the way we all live and work. And of course, rural areas aren't an exception in having been affected by the pandemic, but there are certain aspects of rural communities and businesses that have had to continue to operate and have had to work throughout the pandemic, given the important role that rural Wales plays in ensuring that people have enough food to eat. But of course, there have been impacts as a result of restrictions on the food chain and changes in demand among consumers too. We can never forget, of course, those tourism businesses who have also been affected and have seen huge reductions in incomes because of travel restrictions and restrictions on gathering together and moving around. This, of course, not only affects the tourism businesses, but also those businesses reliant on the tourism businesses. We have a panel of wonderful individuals joining us this evening to discuss their experiences this year and how the pandemic has impacted them and their sectors. And we will perhaps also look to the future of rural Wales too. So what I'll do first of all is to ask the panel to introduce themselves, and just to let you know who you will be questioning this evening.
Jim Jones, if you can just do a brief introduction of yourself. Thank you.
Noswaith dda, good evening, everybody. I'm Jim Jones. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of North Wales Tourism. And North Wales Tourism is one of the largest destination marketing organisations, probably in the UK. We are based in Colwyn Bay with a team of 19, and our pure focus is to promote North Wales as a dynamic tourism destination. And we've been doing that for 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Ask lle droi at y ti nesa,
If
Gareth.
I could now turn to you, Gareth Wyn-Jones, if you'd introduce yourself, please. You'll need to unmute, Gareth. There we are. Well, that's not a particularly good start with the technology. There's a lot of people who'd wanted to mute me over many years, I'm sure. Not at all. Anyway, I'm Gareth Wyn-Jones, a hill farmer from Tyn Llwyfan in Llanfairfechan, and we do immersive tours here too, and we work very closely with a number of local businesses promoting produce, promoting the area, and trying to educate people about agriculture and how we produce food here in Wales. Excellent, thank you, Gareth. If I could now turn to you, Dr Eilir Hughes. Good evening, my name is Eilir Hughes. I'm a GP working in Nefyn on the Llŷn Peninsula, but I'm also a cluster leader. There are 64 clusters across Wales, and yw'r is one of those, and what these are areas where community healthcare is clustered, and I lead in this local area, and I also have responsibilities related to the community hospital just outside Pwllheli in Bryn Berel.
And if I can come to you, Sadie, just to finish off and explain to everybody who you are.
Hi everybody, good evening. My name is Sadie Pierce. I am a small business owner in Pembrokeshire, specifically the Tenby area. I'm a full-time business and media student at Pembrokeshire College, currently in my second year. And I have also been nominated for Welsh Young Entrepreneur of the Year by the Welsh Women's Awards, and I hope to continue that into my future.
Excellent, congratulations on that award as well. If we can start a dechrau gyda trafodaeth falle.
If we could start by looking at what rural Wales looks like to you.
Rural Wales look like for you, isn't it? So perhaps if I come back to Sadie straight off, I think, if that's okay, and we'll work our way back.
So there are a couple of things that come to mind when I think of rural Wales. Specifically in my local area, there are a number of things which make up the area and kind of make the Tenby Pembrokeshire area quite iconic. Specifically, the area that I wanted to focus on was the small businesses which make up the areas within the coastal area. This year specifically has been quite difficult for small businesses. A lot of small businesses usually stay open throughout the summer period and then close through the winter. And they rely on the money which they've made throughout the summer period to sustain them for the winter. And unfortunately this year that has not been the case. There are several small businesses which come to mind in my area. For example, my hometown of Narberth. Narberth is made up of some really cute, quirky small businesses as you walk through the high street, independent restaurants, small shops. And I believe that it just gives the place a bit of character and a bit of individuality. And the tranquility that people get when they visit these small, sort of more rural areas is something that I think that everybody should experience once in their life at least. In Tenby, definitely we get huge influxes of tourists coming from big cities in the summer period. And I just think it's amazing that the people get to experience what we experience every day, and to just share the appreciation for that place is just amazing.
Yeah, and making sure people are aware of it. Jim, that probably resonates with you in terms of the North Wales area, probably.
Absolutely, 100% there with Sadie. And from a tourism perspective, especially across North Wales and with our rural areas, which is probably our finest asset that we have in North Wales. Our landscape, provides some of the greatest experiences you can imagine in the world in some cases. And many rural areas as well in our area are totally reliant on tourism because there is very little else. And the further west you go, especially in North Wales, there is not much, in terms of the economy. But with my marketing hat on, I must say I've probably got the easiest job, and the easiest job is to promote North Wales because we have everything in abundance and all within relatively close proximity. So, our breathtaking landscape we mentioned, our heritage, which is second to none, the seascape, our language, our food and the drink, and it just goes on. And some of our attractions, and I think I just mentioned, are some of the best in the world. So it was no surprise that a few years ago that North Wales was recognised by Lonely Planet as one of the 4th best places to visit on the entire planet.
Yeah, excellent. So, and Gareth, falle yn dod ymlaen ar hynna, yndyfe? So mae'r
Gareth, in developing on that, this image that we have of Wales, and we're fortunate enough to be living in the part of Wales that Jim was mentioning there, but how do you see rural Wales? Well, We're very fortunate. We live in paradise. We have everything on our doorstep, from the sea to the mountains, but we need money, we need people to come into the country to spend money, and it's been such a difficult time for so many people and so many businesses. As a farmer, I've been very fortunate. I can work every day and just carry on, and we have to bear in mind that we must have a rural area that works, and it's that network of people coming together, as Eilir mentioned, working in clusters. Wales is a small country and we have everything we need, but we need to bring people together so that we're all working to the future, whether it's in food, whether it's in tourism, whatever it is. We need to sell what we have here in rural Wales. And we can do that as well as they can in Cardiff or in Swansea. We're all one nation. We all need to work together in order to make progress. And to create those networks to enable that to happen, that's important. Eilir, did you want to come in at that point? Most certainly, yes. I would follow on from Gareth's comments there. What makes rural Wales is the people who live there. It's the communities, and the countryside is vibrant, and I think it should be a priority for us. Rural people traditionally, and that's still the case, that they live in very close communities, and that makes those communities very strong in this modern world. And we are a resilient community. And what that means is that we don't ask much, but when things get difficult, we will fight. And I think there is strength in our communities. Although the numbers might be small, the heart is very strong. And perhaps this is a time for us to reflect on that and see exactly what we want for our future. Well, those communities are so crucially important, aren't they? So what are the challenges and opportunities facing our communities at the moment? And how has the pandemic affected these this year? Because clearly we've heard stories of communities coming together over the past few months, but what are the challenges and opportunities for us as rural communities in Wales? Does anyone want to go first? Gareth? Well, one of the challenges is to keep young people in rural Wales and in Wales. We don't want to lose these people. And agriculture is one sector. Jim, sitting beside me there, has North Wales tourism, which is a huge issue. As it is in South Wales, there is so much work for young people in these jobs, and we need to safeguard them. And this year has hopefully opened our eyes to what we need to do to secure our future, because we need to face challenges such as this on occasion. I know it's been difficult, but we need that challenge, because what I saw in my village was people going back to the local butchers, people going back to the local stores, and we shouldn't turn our back on that, because those things are the backbone of our community and we need to look after them for the future. So we need young people in rural areas. That's what I want to see.
And Sadie, as somebody who's set up her own business in a rural area, I mean, do you think that the opportunities are perhaps a little bit more obvious now after going the realization that you can be based anywhere and have an international business, isn't it? And that's something that perhaps we can show as an opportunity to young people who want to look at our rural areas as somewhere to live.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Specifically over quarantine, there has definitely, or have I noticed, there's been a large influx of people my age and slightly older than me who have taken the opportunity of maybe more free time to start up their own business. And it's great because obviously Pembrokeshire prides itself on its little small businesses. We just have a lot more of that now. I think one of the great things about obviously it's such a difficult situation, but quarantine has definitely given people more time to maybe develop a business idea which they may not have had time for previously, and work on that. I know myself, I have seen a very large increase of online traffic, probably because people have been online shopping quite a bit more than they used to. So due to this, I've definitely seen more people coming online, and personally it's given me more time to develop new designs, to go out there and market the products. But in terms of young people staying around the local area, I definitely believe that that's very important. I think that a lot of young people go off to university and then maybe look at other career options in the bigger cities, but I believe that Pembrokeshire and rural communities is where the heart is, and it's very important to appreciate that. Yes,
we need to persuade them to stay or to go away and come back, isn't it? That's the crucial thing. Eilir, ti'n moyn dy mewn ar y pwynt na fyna?
Eilir, did you want to come in at that point? Thank you. Of course, one has to look close to home, and I look at my own family, so I'm quite a rare example where you have someone who has left the area, done extended periods of training and education in university, but I have then returned with those skills in order to service this community, and the same is true of my sister who's a vet, and that's what we need to emphasize here. With this pandemic, we know that you don't have to live in the city. You can be successful and you can enjoy life and have good quality of life living in rural Wales. People are now seeing those values. Less traffic, less pollution, having more time to spend with family, particularly if your family lives in the countryside. I think people have reflected on what they want from their lives, and it's now an opportunity to attract those people who perhaps had left and hadn't thought that it would be possible for them to sustain their career, but they can now come back and they can contribute to society and the community and enrich that community. And it's that value of living in rural Wales as well.
From a tourism point of view, isn't it? Do you see opportunities coming here in terms of tourism, or are there still very big challenges that we have to consider in terms of in terms of the effect it's had?
I think first and foremost is just to recognise how huge and important the tourism and the hospitality economy is to the rural areas into North Wales, because in North Wales, the economic value is worth 3.6 billion, and it creates 46,000 full-time equivalent jobs. And the biggest challenge during this pandemic for us, and it's probably been one of the most disappointing, I understand, but is the anti-visitor rhetoric that has been ongoing for quite some time, because it's not a competition between tourism businesses and our communities, because our tourism businesses are our communities also. So we have a lot of work in order to do to try and express the importance of tourism to our communities. And I'll give you one example. The hotel in the Conwy Valley employ 151 people, and they have done regular people all through the year. They try to keep them employed all through the year, and they supply approximately £1 million to the supply chain. So the butcher, the greengrocer, the fishmonger, the craft beer and food distributor are all part of the bigger picture of that community that feeds tourism. So it's extremely important, and I think one of the biggest challenges is just to make sure that we work closer with the community and they do recognise the importance of our tourism sector.
So is that the priority in terms of moving forward, to make sure that that relationship is stronger, isn't it, in terms of that wider network in terms of community in rural Wales?
Absolutely. For us, we promoted ourselves as a friendly destination where visitors are welcome. That's important for us. I think overarching, the big challenges, as always within rural areas, are the digital connectivity and the transport. And it's also that we have a proper infrastructure in place to deal with the issues that are caused by a huge influx of visitors coming into the area, which was totally expected, but we weren't prepared for it.
I'm sure digital connectivity will be a topic that comes up for later on as well in that conversation. So I'll leave that for one second. Rhywun arall eisiau dod mewn ar...
Does anyone else want to come in on what you'd prioritise, perhaps? We focused on a few issues there, but what would you see as being priorities in terms of rural communities? I, as I mentioned earlier, would want to see more collaboration and that we can use seasonal local foods so we can have lamb, beef and vegetables all into our schools, into our hospitals. We need to promote Wales as an entity. Jim has just said how much money comes into North Wales just in one sector. Well, for us, we do immersive tours here. Jim will know this year was supposed to be huge for us. We'd booked almost 60 tours in. I bought a brand new trailer to travel up, but that trailer hasn't carried anyone as of yet. But that doesn't matter, because I know that it's there, it's ready to go, and all of these people are staying in the castle in Conwy, eating local meat and local produce. We have so much to offer, and we do have to bring everyone together so that everyone's working together. There's no point having one person here not listening to anyone else. And I think the Senedd and everyone needs to be involved with this and need to promote everything that's Welsh, because we do have problems in this world. And we, of course, are facing climate change, but we do have something that we can produce. My family's been on this farm for 370 years producing quality produce, and farmers across Wales are doing the same. Agri-Advisor Cymru have come in and have started to highlight that. We all now need to come together, support each other however we can, as small businesses and everything else. And I'm sure that we can make progress as a nation in order to make such a difference for us as the people of Wales. Well, there are two elements in terms of education there. It's educating people coming from outside, but also educating people who live locally about local food and local produce and the availability of that. Eilir. Well, yes, I wanted to follow on from Gareth's comments on the importance of food, but also healthy food and well-being. I think, again, this has been an opportunity for us to reflect as a result of COVID, and perhaps we as a society are reflecting on that and thinking, well, what's most important to us? And that's health. And that we should be healthy and able to work and live our lives. And an understanding of food is crucial to that. People talk a lot about exercise, and it's important, yes, but we tend to forget about food. And we in Wales produce some of the finest produce and ingredients. Gareth's working 24/7 trying to promote that, I know. Jim is also working to promote the benefits of being in rural Wales and that it's good for our well-being to be in the countryside, but there's a great deal that we can do for ourselves and the people who live here too. To touch on what Jim touched on earlier, local people understanding how important tourism is, well, I think perhaps there is a gap in understanding there. We must bear in mind that some of our poorest areas are in rural areas, and they're often forgotten because you don't tend to get the social problems. So there's not a lot of noise made about that, and then people just get on with it. And perhaps if we can demonstrate the importance of tourism to them and to explain what it provides, and if that were to help make their lives better, then that would strike a better balance. Well, certainly 2020 has been a year to prioritise health ahead of everything, and I think it's important that we educate people on that. Sadie, do you want to come in on this particular question?
Yeah, I can definitely agree on sort of utilising the community spirit in terms of fresh fruit and vegetables, locally sourced. I believe that's definitely one of the most important areas which we can definitely improve on as a community as a whole. Personally, my closest big name supermarket, for example Tesco, is 15 miles away from my house. So we definitely try to utilise the smaller businesses, for example food, produce, milk, as they're obviously a lot closer. I think that one thing which can definitely try to be improved on this year is encouraging people to start up their own small food businesses. For example, I live in Templeton, which is a small village. We have no shops. We have one restaurant, which sort of has locally sourced food in there. However, we do have a lot of farms in the village, which I believe it would be lovely to start up a little farm shop, maybe with the locally sourced bread. But I definitely think that it would be important to utilise that. As also helping to fund these people with their ideas as well. Maybe creating grants, because I think that it can definitely be intimidating, especially in these times with the high street in so much trouble. Personally, I work in Carmarthen, where every day I go to work and I see shops, for example, big name brands like River Island and Topshop, from small independent restaurants, all shutting down. And I think that the coronavirus pandemic has definitely impacted their sales. And many of them, business owners that I've spoken to, are unable to pay a lot of the business rates, mainly just because this year, as everybody knows, it's been such a difficult year for business owners. Even bigger name brands are struggling. Yeah, definitely trying to encourage to fill up that space. Because as much as online businesses are absolutely amazing, it's so lovely to see all the it just brings the community together, having streets full of shops, especially independent shops, and it can definitely be intimidating to sort of take that leap into actually starting up your own shop. So I think that something which could definitely be helped on would be that.
And of course, in the last 6 months, we've seen lots of dairy farms open their own shops at the end of farm drives as well, in terms of milk machines as well. So we kind of there's definitely a change in trend and developments in terms of the way we buy food, isn't it? In terms of wanting to have locally sourced food. So beth yw'r dyfodol yn fe?
So what does the future hold? What's our future in rural Wales? What are we looking for in terms of how we want rural Wales to look in the future, and what steps would you like to see taken in order to deliver that? Sadie mentioned grants there to support startups, but are there other things that could be done in order to improve and encourage the creation of networks and the collaboration that we've been talking about? Does anyone want to come in there? Jim?
When we look at what we've got at this moment in time, we've already got, you talked about food and drink, and we've got one of the best offers that we can promote, to the world. And I think in practice, we've already done that in terms of our, for example, our relationship that we've developed with Japan. And, they have lamb weeks where they promote Welsh lamb. They talk about the Welsh food and drink as if it's their own. And this is a huge commodity, that raises our profile on the global marketplace. And I think really that's something that we, will want to be strengthening and doing a lot more of. For us, going forward and making sure that our rural areas prosper, we've been promoting ourselves because we've got the confidence to do that as the adventure capital of not just the UK, of Europe, because we strongly believe we have that product that we can, shout from the rooftops to say, we have got this, and you need to come to Wales and to our areas and just see what it is we have for you to experience. So, from me and from a tourism perspective, it's about raising the profile of our best assets, and I've mentioned food and drink, our landscape, and promoting that to the world and not being afraid to do that. I think that will go an awful long way. And at the same time, as Sadie was saying, we've got a lot of micro businesses, which is the backbone of the tourism industry. And it's about supporting them. So in our area, the cheese delis, are becoming extremely popular and popular with visitors as well. And the more we've got of that, the better it is for the communities and for the people that, prepare all the food and prepare the drink in order to supply those businesses. So I think, is to use those assets and market them globally is a real plus for the area of Wales and also definitely the rural areas.
Excellent, thank you, Jim. Gareth, do you mind to come in?
Yeah, Gareth, did you want to come in?
I'd like to reiterate what you've just said as well, Jim, because when we do the immersive travel here with the Americans over the last 2 years, we've been feeding them as well. So whatever on the farm is seasonal, Of course, we give them lamb and we give them beef, but whatever's come out of my garden, they get to try. We use local beers. And let me tell you, these people are going home not just seeing, you know, a Welsh hill farm or you know, Conway, the castle, but they're taking home a piece of Wales because they've really gone into the heart, I think, by eating the food that's come straight out of the ground. We've got something really amazing. And, you know, you take that forward with a lot of people around you, you can build on that. There's hundreds of thousands of farms in Wales, and we could help little small businesses with that. You know, Sadie was saying, let's open little shops. You know, our village, they don't pay business tax on the little shops, which is right. And that's what government should be doing. They should be supporting them little shops, giving them a starter package. Some will start, some will fail, but you have to try. And, you know, to see our village full of nice little shops, if it's a gift shop, you know, or the butchers, or there's a flower shop, it's nice because people come into the village and they see something, you know. And I think we have to have that busyness in our little villages, in our towns, and that sells something again. So again, you know, it's that hub, it's bringing together. But again, I'm going to go back to government, you know, and we need that. We need that backing. We need that forward thinking from our politicians working together. And I think sometimes we can bring some of the top people in every industry to sit down on a table to create a hub with some great ideas, get some brainstorming. That's a television term that we use when we have an idea to go forward with something, you know, but get these people talking together to help Welsh Government to drive forward. We've got a brilliant country, we've got fantastic people, and we need them to work together. And, you know, even in this pandemic, we've got the communications, we can bring this to the floor and get people to, you know, work together for the future.
It's creating that strategic vision, isn't it? That's, you know, in the way forward. Eilir, if I come to you next.
Yeah, just I ddod yn ôl I rhywbeth dwi'n meddwl bod rhaid ni dal gofio.
Yes, just to return to something that I think we do need to bear in mind. People do need to live here 12 months of the year, and if they're to do that, they have to be able to afford homes. They have to be able to buy affordable housing in their communities, and there's a developing problem in this part of Wales, and there is huge concern as to what's happening in the housing market, because if you can't afford these homes, you can't live in them, and you can't contribute to the community and to society. And what I would like for the future of our countryside is that there should be more equality, that we do insist on services that people in urban areas perhaps take for granted. I'm talking about health services, but also social services. Why can't we care for our older people who do live here? The average age in rural areas is far higher than in urban areas. And of course, they do move here, they retire into the area. And those people very often need care. And why can't we make the care sector a sector that people living in rural areas want to go into? I think it's important that we value care as a service, and with the developing technology, we can talk to you virtually in all parts of Wales. Why can't we ensure that we provide our services to people at the far ends of the Llŷn Peninsula or next door to the hospital? Why can't we provide those services? And it all comes down to confidence. People's confidence at the moment is low, and then that has an impact on mental health. And that's the pandemic that we're facing here. The virus will disappear, but we will have a mental health pandemic. And I do think we need to have that as a priority, because without health, it's very difficult to move forward economically or socially. Those are very important points, Eilir. And the technology now, as you say, enables us to meet with anyone in any part of Wales. So why couldn't a doctor from one part of Wales provide treatment over a platform such as this to someone in another area. And I think that's developed a great deal over the last 6 months. Things we thought that were impossible 6 months ago have now become commonplace. Even us technophobes have become used to using these systems. Jim, you wanted to come in again.
Yeah, sorry not to go across because I know what an emotive subject the second home issue is. I just wanted to endorse what Gareth was saying, because if you're ever looking for an example of a farmer who's still working on his farm 100%, but for diversification, his offer of these immersive tours are probably some of the best opportunities to experience what Wales is all about. And in the rural hinterland, to experience what they do, to listen to Gareth's stories, to hear about his food and drink that he supplies them, is probably one of the best things I look forward to on a Monday morning when he starts to post his social media footage of all, predominantly Americans, but many nationalities, of their experiences, and you can see in their faces the fun. And that's exactly the experiences that we want people to know about Wales and enjoy about Wales. Coming back, Dr. Ellie is absolutely right. It's a big issue in some of the rural areas. Very, very difficult situation. But as I say, if you want local people to stay, you need jobs. And at the moment, one of the biggest supplier of those jobs is the tourism economy.
Yeah. Perhaps we can move on to another topic which has come up earlier, which is rural connectivity, isn't it? Because that's a really important issue for us in rural areas. Became a Covid wedi dangos I ni,
I think COVID has demonstrated just how important it is to be able to communicate with people online. So, is this opening in terms of digital connectivity a blessing or a curse? I think you might have responded to that already, but I just wanted to check that nobody saw it as being a negative. But also, can we take advantage of this opportunity to develop our rural areas? And what do we need to put in place in terms of infrastructure to enable us to utilise those services fully in rural Wales? Eilir, that was something that you alluded to. I'll come back to you. Yes, if you look back to the very beginning of this time, we as a health service had to move at a pace that had never been seen before. And I've been banging my head against the wall for years in trying to find solutions to various problems, and overnight, in a way, those barriers were removed and we could find those solutions. And I think that freedom for people who have the innovation and the vision to develop things, whatever sector, it could be health, tourism, agriculture, it doesn't matter. I think that's hugely important, that we use this technology as something that can release us rather than enslave us.
Sadie, I mean, that's probably a very big part, important part of your business, isn't it? Being able to utilise that online presence. I mean, have you had any difficulties in being able to access that, being in the rural area or not?
Yeah, so definitely, I believe that having a digital online presence is one of the most key aspects to running a business in the 21st century, specifically social media. It probably seems that everything's online now. Businesses are having to adapt faster than ever to the ever-changing internet. I have definitely had struggles with gaining probably an online presence on platforms such as Instagram, because I feel like you have to understand the algorithm to be able to sort of grow on those platforms. And without having a base at the start, it's quite difficult to grow. However, I do believe that it is important to help with those digital resources and try and find out as much information as you can. Specifically small businesses on the high street, I've noticed them as soon as quarantine started. One thing that I noticed was that shops which I loved in Narberth had created Instagram accounts, and you could sort of see their products as if you were in the shop, which I really enjoyed, and comment on them and help to engage with that. I think the one thing that everybody could improve on as a whole is engaging with these small businesses, because a lot of the time that is their way of getting their business out there, especially small startup businesses. Engagement really is key, and really helping these local businesses is definitely one thing which everybody could take on as a whole. Even something as small as liking or sharing a post can really make a world of a difference to an online business. One thing that I have noticed sort of having my own online business is that, well, sometimes around Christmas time, I will go to Christmas markets and sort of try to sell my items there. This year, not so much, obviously. So I've sort of had to focus my energy into, again, gaining that online presence, and yes.
Do we need to worry, though, about those that perhaps don't have that internet access, or those that, you know, are perhaps not as au fait with technology as we may be, isn't it? Eilir, ti'n mynd i mewn ar y pwynt na?
Eilir, you want to come in at that point? Yes, thank you. I was going to raise that very issue because I forgot to mention it earlier. We were talking about digital literacy, and there are many people out there who still don't make use of this interactive technology and don't think it's just older people. There are people of all ages, and I see it on a daily basis when I refer people to online resources and so on. I will speak as an individual. I'm not stupid, but I won't go on Facebook. I don't like it for many reasons, but because of that, I do miss out on local events. I miss out on information about businesses that are trying to market their produce in the area. I would be delighted if it was possible to create some new interface, which would be something that we could take pride in here in Wales. So companies such as Sadie's company or Gareth's farm could use to promote their produce, or all those things that Jim is promoting in North Wales. That would be wonderful, rather than us having to rely on these huge platforms like Facebook. You wanted to come in there, Gareth? Well, I'm just going to tell you a story about what I did over the weekend. I received a message from a small company, and it was a lady who made small owls and robins and all sorts of designs, and she asked whether I'd share her page on my business page. I have a business page on Facebook, and there are over 50,000 followers, so I gave her a share. And she sent me a message today, and it brought a tear to the eye, because it said that she'd sold more this weekend than she had in the month before that. So we can make a difference, and I agree entirely with you, Eilir. Facebook can be wonderful, but it can be horrible too. And I do think you're entirely right. We need to look for something. Perhaps, again, this is something for the Senedd. We need to look at ideas where we can bring people together in these hubs. And I would be more than happy, and I'm sure Jim and Sadie and yourself would be more than happy. We want everyone from all parts of Wales to share in this and to create something, to generate momentum. And mental health is an issue that I see so much of, and there are so many people sending me messages. It is a dark time for lots of people at the moment, but we have to look for the light, and we have to work together so that we go towards that light and we help people. And one of the reasons I put so many of these videos up is to put a smile on people's face. Someone who might be stuck on the M25 in a traffic jam, or might be stuck in an office. And my office living the dream is something that I often say. I'm lucky, and I want to share that with people so that they can understand that they can be part of that too. They can come here and purchase produce from our small shops. One other thing that I think we really need to work on is connectivity. internet connectivity. I had to leave one company this year and have a private provider because my wife was sitting here and she would have divorced me if I hadn't paid to get a proper internet connection, because she does all of the work in the office, fair play to her, and the internet kept dropping off and we had no broadband speed to speak of. And we've got out there, we found a Welsh company and they've done a wonderful job. So the technology is out there. We have to help these small businesses to access that technology in rural areas, and we can change things for everyone. If I could look now to the questions coming in through the chat function. So if I could move to one of those questions, and it returns to a point raised by Eilir a little earlier. So as a result of COVID, more and more people are moving to rural Wales and working from home, and that's caused great inflation in house prices here in the Llŷn Peninsula. So as a questioner from the Llŷn Peninsula, obviously so much so that there are very many villages where local people can't purchase homes. That makes rural areas unsustainable. What's the solution to that? And this isn't something that's affecting the Llŷn area, it's affecting the whole of Wales, of course, and has done over the past few months. So I'll come back to you, Eilir, as it's something that you've already raised. Yes, I was driving through the village today in order to visit a patient, and there were sold or for sale signs on many of the houses. In 200 yards, there were 11 signs and they all said sold. Now, I've never seen anything like it, and it just shows that the market is flying at the moment. And the messages I hear from local people, and much of this comes from young people who want to remain in the area and to work and live here, and they feel that they're being priced out of the market. And that's a huge concern for me, because we need to ask whether these are going to be homes that people live in permanently so that they can contribute to the community, or are they going to be holiday homes? And that's a concern. And it's something that we've lived with in Gwynedd over many years. And I think local people have had enough and want to see something done. They want to see steps taken whereby it would be possible to strike that balance where people can come here to enjoy themselves during the summer when the weather's fine, but also that people can live here. What the solution is, well, I'm not sure. But first of all, we have to acknowledge the problem, and I'm not sure if that's been done within government as of yet.
You know, you're based in North Wales, you're bound to kind of be noticing this trend as well in terms of the purchasing of houses. Can you hear me, Jim? Sorry.
No, I didn't hear you. Sorry, you're
Sorry.
faded. I beg your pardon.
No, it's okay. Have you noticed the same trend in terms of your area of North Wales, isn't it, in terms of the purchasing of houses?
Yeah, I think it's an epidemic at the moment in terms of the number of houses that are on the market, not just in the rural areas, but also in the coastal areas. And even stay along the coast, there's many houses that have got sold signs on them. So it's a very difficult one. It's something that's been around for a long, long time. And I understand how emotive it is. And, you know, it's market forces, because local people, you know, who want to sell their property will want to sell it for the best price. We know that. How it's going to be tackled going forward, to be honest, I have absolutely no idea. Mm-hmm. I think the worry is, again, coming back to where I started, is that the anger from the community is directed towards, you know, the visitors and people who have second home and use them as holiday accommodation, and which, you know, they're entirely entitled to do that. But I think if it's managed and they are part of the community and they employ local people and they pay their, you know, their council tax above and beyond what normal people pay within those communities, then you know, they're doing everything that they're expected to do. However, I think it's part of a bigger plan that needs to be addressed, you know, from people, you know, in government going forward.
Thanks, Jim. Gareth, ti eisiau dymuno?
Yeah,
Gareth, did you want to come in? Yes, I've been a local councillor for 10 years in Llanfairfechan, and you do see the difference. The LDP, the local development plan, is about to come out, and it's time the council looked at this. I know that there are affordable homes, but we need to look after our local people. We need to look after our young people. We have to help them to get on the housing ladder, or we're going to lose them. And yes, it's difficult. It's very difficult indeed. But I think it's 30% when they're building new homes, that 30% have to be affordable for local people. Well, the Senedd and everyone else needs to look at how we can make changes here. I was involved in a Pawb a'i Farn programme on S4C many years ago, and in Switzerland, I saw that they provided so much money to people in certain parishes and areas to help them to stay there. Yes, it would be difficult for us to do that with taxpayers' money, but if we want to keep the Welsh character of our villages, we have to do something. It's not going to be it to everyone's taste. I have 3 children. I want to see all 3 of them living in Llanfairfechan because I love this place. And I want to ensure that they're able to do that. The councils also need to look at some of these people who do put in planning applications for houses on farms, these 106s. They have to look at them and they have to try and help the next generation. And there are many farm buildings that aren't being used. And is that something that we could use? We have a lot of brownfield sites, Jim will know, industrial areas where we could develop affordable housing in those areas. There's a great deal that could be done. Yes, it's complex, but we need to work together for the future. And looking also at the planning regulations, perhaps, and to see what can be done to assist. Sadie, do you want to come in on this issue?
I'm assuming Pembrokeshire's got a very similar issue in terms of the housing market at the moment.
Yes, I can definitely agree with that. So where I live, there in the past probably about 1.5 years, there have been 2 new housing estates built in my rural village with 30 plus houses in each. One thing which I definitely think is an important issue to focus on is affordable housing prices for people within the local area. I am 17, so in a couple of years, I'm definitely going to be looking towards buying a house, and I really love the local area which I live in. And I would love to live in the local area when I'm older. The inflation of the housing prices, especially within recent years, has definitely been something which has been on my mind lately. Sort of looking towards buying houses, you know, you don't really want to be paying an overly inflated price for that, especially looking at buying one probably at about age 21, 22. But yeah, I definitely agree. I have definitely seen an influx of people not from the local area coming into the village, which is amazing, as it obviously gets you to know new people. Again, builds community spirit, but I definitely believe that houses should be more affordable, especially for people within the local area. And again, in Pembrokeshire, it's definitely something which is very apparent.
Mm-hmm.
People move down here.
Thank you, Sadie. Right, we're going to something totally different now. So there's a question come in, and I didn't think we'd be talking about the US elections tonight, but the question talks about the US elections and saying that the only time that Wales got mentioned was when Wales entered the fire break. And that given that Wales has contributed such a large number of people to the USA in terms of migration, etc., what would the panel recommend we do for the USA to recognise that we are Wales, not England or the United Kingdom? We talked about promotion earlier, Jim, isn't it? What do you think we should be doing in terms of promoting ourselves and our perhaps brand Wales internationally? I'm not, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be just the US, of course. I mean, you talked about Japan earlier, isn't it? But you know, what could we be doing to promote that Wales brand internationally?
First and foremost, we don't need to be throwing hundreds of millions of pounds at any country in order to raise, you know, the profile of Wales. And I think as an exemplar project, you know, the work that we've done in Japan has been developed through developing deep, meaningful relationships. So not only have Japan and the powerhouse of the Japanese tourism identified a town in Wales, Conway, as one of the top 30 most beautiful towns and villages in Europe. And they themselves started to promote that to their market. And 3 years later, they then came up with a new campaign called the Top 20 Most Beautiful Roads in Europe. and it was the North Wales Expressway, the A55, that they selected, and they called it the Road of Castles in Wonderland. All we did was embrace that, showed that we cared, started to develop deep, meaningful relationships like I had, leading to, first time it's been done, the twinning of Conway Castle with the Measure Castle. And a lot of work is starting to be developed now between, you know, the education sector, between the town councils and the city council over there as well, in order to raise our profile, you know, from Japan and also from here. So, but we're doing it with Korea. We're doing it with other areas. And it's rather than going for the whole country, I think you just target an area, be very, very specific in what you're trying to do, and eventually the news spreads. And I think that's what's worked really, really well for us and put us on the map in Japan. So if we can replicate that in other places, then that's one way.
Anything is possible, isn't it? So Gareth, what do you think we should be doing to try and promote Wales?
Just carry on regardless as we are now. I think we've got so much to offer, you know. I've been working with a German television company over the summer, and so many of these people are enjoying the language, the way that we live, you know, the whole aspect of Cymru Cymraeg, you know, mae o yn mor bwysig.
It is so hugely important for them too. People coming from the United States, we have hundreds of them. We've been doing these immersive tours for 6 years. We started small, but we generated momentum, and they're coming from all corners of the world now. Jim came out, or rather went out to Japan, and he went out with the small woolen hearts that my daughter had made, and those were wonderful because we sell those here. My wife and Mary, my daughter, make those, and they're sold across the world. And there are opportunities to do business and to sell Wales. It's not just these major ad campaigns. Social media provides a platform to us all, and we can all work together in order to sell what we have, whether it's Pembrokeshire, the Llŷn Peninsula, Llanfairfechan. One of the things that I've found that's very strong here is our history. We can sell that history. The history of them goes back to the Celts and the Carneddau. We've been doing programs across the world, and at the moment we're in a position where we've created a market for these mountain ponies, taking people up in the Honda Pioneer buggy, and they were flying into Bodyscallan and then coming down here to Llanfairfechan, and then they sit down and have Sunday lunch that Mrs. Jones has cooked. Local meat and vegetable. People loved it. So yes, we can all play our part in selling what we have here in Wales.
What about you, Sadie, isn't it, in terms of that international presence for businesses, perhaps smaller businesses in Wales, and being able to, you know, to sell that on a global scale, isn't it?
Yes, I definitely think sort of distributing products on a global scale is one of the most important business objectives that I've set myself for this year. As of this year, I have noticed business growth. I have recently had a sale going to Canada, which I was honestly astonished at. I actually had one yesterday going to Canada. I've had Australia and places such as France. But in terms of marketing Wales as such an iconic country, we have such a fascinating history. We have such amazing culture. Our beaches are amongst the cleanest in the world, which I think is a really important factor which other countries should recognise. In terms of we are Wales, we are not England, we are Wales, and we are our own country. I think that's definitely important to recognise. Being a media student, one of the most fascinating things I found is that a lot of the tourism in the South Wales came from Harry Potter. Specifically in Freshwater West, there is this particular site which was the death of one of the characters in Harry Potter. And within that year, there was a huge influx of tourists to that one particular place in Freshwater West, which is a beach which is quite close to myself. So even including Wales in maybe a TV series, movies, for example, Game of Thrones, a lot of it was filmed there. Even things such as small as that can maybe make people recognise Wales as its own individual country and appreciate its beautiful wildlife, as well as iconic castles. And again, I'm a Celebrity, continuing next week, is one thing which I think would be amazing for the local economy. Obviously, the beautiful castle in Wales is being recognised. I was having a look and it is honestly gorgeous. And I think that that will, again, help people recognise how beautiful our country is as a whole. And again, it being on British television, broadcast all around Britain, is something that will definitely draw attention to our amazing country.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that starting next Sunday evening, isn't it? Eilir, I fenni gyda ti, achos we're nearly getting to
Eilir, we are nearly getting to the end of our time. Well, following on the same themes, what's important is the wealth that we have in this country. The landscape talks for itself, but we have stiff competition with America because their national parks are quite wonderful. I've been fortunate to visit a few of them. What we have and they don't have, and perhaps other beautiful nations such as New Zealand don't have, is our history, our culture and our heritage. If you look at mythology, the Mabinogion and the stories of the saints, look at all of these villages starting with the word Llan. There is a wealth of history in every village, every community, and I think perhaps that we need to teach ourselves those histories. I don't think that we as a nation are immersed in our own nation. If we were to teach our history in schools in terms of what Wales is and what makes Wales special, it might be easier for us then to promote that. I feel that when I speak about this with fellow Welsh people, they're not aware of it, and perhaps the visitors know our history better than we do ourselves. So I think there's an important lesson there. And returning to this vision for Wales of the future, well, it's a healthier Wales, and Wales as a healthy place to visit. If you want to play the stereotype, then look at the overweight American. Well, come to Wales, where you can adopt healthier practices, enjoy the open air, eat nutritious and healthy food. So they say in marketing that you should look at your USP. Well, I think Eilir's listed a number of things there that we could call our USP, and I'm grateful to each and every one of us, one of you as panelists this evening, for taking us through your vision for the future of our rural areas. And I have to say that I am more encouraged, having had this discussion, in terms of the opportunities that exist for those of us living in rural Wales. And what we need perhaps is confidence. Confidence was mentioned a number of times. What we need is the confidence to get out there and to be confident about what we have to offer as Wales and as rural Wales, and those things we can offer to people who want to visit us and who want to move here to live or live here already. So thank you all very much for your contributions. Thank you also for the questions. We've not covered half of them, so I do apologise to those people who submitted questions that weren't answered, but we've had a very rich debate and I'm very grateful to you for submitting those questions. So I think that brings the evening to a close. Thank you very much and a very good evening to all.